Mr. Speaker, Order 34, Rule 12, and by your leave, may I read the order?
Go ahead.
A member who has contributed to a question may again be heard to offer explanation of some material part of the speech which has been misunderstood, provided that it will not matter. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that when I read my prayers, I mentioned in prayer 4 that Sir Celestine Omehia be directed to refund all monies received from the states within 7 days from the date of the House resolution. And Mr. Speaker, you know that members have, particularly my dear colleague, Honorable Lolo, and I think one other member raised concerns concerning the 7 days that I mentioned. I think they misunderstood what I meant there. Mr. Speaker, the 7 days notice is to give a time frame where we are an assembly. We don't give omnibus directives, and that's exactly what the prayer is saying. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that we do understand that this is the legislative arm of government. We have the executive arm, and we also know that the executive has ways of making sure that they implement decisions of the legislature. So for the 7 days that has been mentioned, Mr. Speaker, I think given that time frame, we should be able to so reform. And if he is unable to reform, Mr. Speaker, the executive will certainly know what to do. And Mr. Speaker, we know even in the courts of law, when the judge grants you damages, the judge will not also give you details of what will happen if you don't pay the damage or if you don't bring it to this or that. So I think that going into all that details will not be so helpful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much. Doing here today our legislative business. It is therefore pertinent on the House to adopt that Nigeria Weekly Law Report as a working document of the House. I therefore call motion for adoption of the Weekly Law Report as part of the working document of the House. Motion. Honorable Christian Ayabo.
The House be adopted as for the House today. I so move.
Second.
Mao, I represent Kokana State Constituency. I rise to second the motion moved by Honorable Ayako. I so second.
Thank you. And I believe each and every one of you have a copy of the motion. Can we proceed to debate the motion as moved by the leader of the House? Debate. Michael. Okay, do this.
Mr. Speaker, one thing I cannot do is to stand in this chamber and belong to those who disobey the pronouncement of the Supreme Court. Nigeria. That Sir Celestine Omehia was never a governor in the eyes of the law. It's not debatable. It's not debatable. The law report as cited is very obvious. If we say that we will disobey the pronouncement of Supreme Court, remember the pronouncement of Supreme Court, our Constitution, our House rule, our extant laws, they gather to guide us to make laws in this chamber. And so disobeying them will be undermining the integrity, the sanctity of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. I will agree with Mr. Leader in the motion which he has moved. Doing so, doing otherwise, I don't think my constituents will like it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, I represent Aoda East Constituency 2 in the Rivers State House of Assembly and this day here. Mr. Speaker, I want to completely align myself with this motion which intends to rescind the House of Assembly resolution on the recognition of Sir Celestine Omehia as former governor of Rivers State. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, you would agree with me that it is provided in law that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. And to err is human. I want to agree that this House, sometime in June 30th, 2015, did err by recognizing Sir Celestine Omehia as former governor. The Supreme Court, being the highest court in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, especially in the words of Paguntade, did say that it was fact Amechi and not Omehia who contested the election, and therefore said for that the Omehia remained no more than a pretender to the office. This has been gazetted in our laws, and of course the Nigerian Weekly Law Report has been adopted in this House just a few minutes ago. I therefore want to say that this House, being a lawmaking institution, this House being an institution that respects the rule of law, it will be out of place if we continue to pretend and fold our hands and close our eyes to brass and crass illegality. No matter who is involved, no matter whose horse is God, we must stand up to our institutional responsibility. That is why I align myself with prayer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The state honor of Grand Service Star of Rivers State can only be bestowed on someone who has been governor of Rivers State. Therefore, Sir Celestine Omehia, in the eyes of the law, having not been a former governor, and the Supreme Court has still today not rescinded our decision, I agree that that title be withdrawn. And also, that every money received in that regard should be refunded back to Rivers State government. I believe that my constituents, being respecters of the rule of law, also totally support my position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House, being a legislative assembly that also depends on the rule of law, will now look back to unmake what it has made before. There is no law that is absolute, and there is no motion, the resolution of any house, that is absolute. At any point, you now have further and better particulars, the House can reconvene to take additional decision. That's exactly what we are doing. I just want to correct that impression. It is very important, because what we are doing, we are not doing it based on sentiments or emotion. We are doing it because we are lawmakers and we will act within the confines of the law. And you know, in 2015, that prayer is still subsisting, that all wrongs against the state will be remedied, but any law, any wrong against our individual persons or members, we can forgive. But such wrongs against the state, we shall remedy. And that's exactly what we are doing. Thank you. I will recognize in order of the request that came. I will finish from this flank, then I go to this flank. More.
Thank the leader of the House, Honorable Martin Ambulile, for this motion. Mr. Speaker, with all respect, this assembly, I would like to mention, is a creation of the law. This assembly is here because the law breathed air into it to make it functional. This assembly as well is human, like every human being, as rightly said by the right honorable Deputy Speaker, is bound to commit some errors, maybe inadvertently. I do not claim omnipotent or all-knowing. I do not, as a human being, once in a while, because of your actions, there may be occasions where the actions you take today, maybe considering the situation on ground, may end up tomorrow not in this situation. Even in a matter like this, Mr. Speaker, even the judges who sit in court to decide the fate of litigants, there comes a time when a judge even the Supreme Court can find itself in a situation like that. The Supreme Court can take a decision when it is not fully abreast with maybe the latest position of the law, because they are human. Or when a judge, simply put this way, Mr. Speaker, takes a decision when it is not in full abreast of the law. Lawyers has a way of explaining it. Lawyers will say that the judge took the decision par equilibrium. And even the Supreme Court can divide itself. So there is nothing strange that is happening here today that does not happen anywhere. Mr. Speaker, it is this assembly that filed a motion, a similar motion, that resolved sometimes 2015 that His Excellency, I don't know if I'm free to continue to use that word, Sir Celestine Omehia been accorded the privileges of a governor. And like the leader has said, we resolved asked the government to comply with our resolution, to abide by our resolution. That was because, like the leader rightly said, we aren't abreast with all the facts. And today, more facts have emerged, and we are here through the same motion, through another motion, to undo what we have done. Mr. Speaker, let me remind every person we are under a duty here. With the oath, we swore to an oath that we will abide by the law. And if the Supreme Court has given the final decision in any matter, that matter becomes the law. Whatever decision the Supreme Court takes becomes the law. It will be most unfair that we are seated here today as lawmakers and we see ourselves or begin to present ourselves as those who break the law. It will be most unfair. We have made that resolution and we are here to making it because we have found out that the decision we took was not the state of affairs, the true state of affairs. Mr. Speaker, if we go through the law report as presented by the leader of the House, you will find out that the court did say.
Well, can you focus on the prayers so that other members who are also wishing to speak can do so?
Mr. Speaker, like I was saying before you interrupted, the law says that in the eyes of the law, that Sir Celestine Omehia was never a governor. In the eyes of the law, he was never a governor. If the law says so, then it will be out of place for us here to continue to accord him the privileges that is due a governor. And so, Mr. Speaker, I will quickly align myself with the prayers. Prayer one, that this House resolve to rescind its former resolution where this House accorded the Celestine Omehia the status of a governor, requesting the government of the day to give him the privilege, to accord the privileges and benefits that is due a governor. I align myself with prayer one, that decision be rescinded. I also associate myself with every other prayer, but prayer 4 that says that Omehia refunds all monies paid to him that the Rivers State government has benefits and entitlements, particularly the sum of blah 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 600 million and other benefits to the state of within 7 days for the date of this resolution. My only concern there is, if nothing happens after 7 days, we just leave this thing open. I will suggest that we put something extra to say that in event Celestine Omehia fails to refund this money after 7 days, that the government should take every legal means available to secure and ensure that that money is reimbursed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If everybody keep speaking here, you know we are going to the same direction. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy today. In fact, this has shown me that members of Rivers State House of Assembly are actually men of integrity. Haven't also, in fact, I want to thank the leadership of this House for furnishing us with the judgment. At least from the judgments, we looked at it and we knew very well that we need to do justice. And today I'm proud that I'm one of those doing justice today to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. Speaker, I align myself with all the prayers moved by the leader of the House of Assembly, Honorable Martin Samewule, especially asking Celestine Omehia not to forthwith address himself as the former governor of Rivers State in anywhere, in any gathering. And Mr. Speaker, I also align myself with the another of the motion, the prayer, sorry, Mr. Speaker, asking Celestine Omehia to refund everything. In fact, I wish I could say including himself, to refund everything that he has benefited when that law was not carried out. And Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy being part of those making this correction. And just as I said earlier on, I thank the leader of Rivers State House of Assembly for furnishing us with all this. That every prayer here, Mr. Speaker, I'm fully in support of it. Sir Celestine Omehia should not address himself as the former governor of Rivers State, and all entitlements given to him should be returned, because if you go clearly from that judgment, Sir Celestine Omehia was not even a candidate of the party, more or less winning the election. So, Mr. Speaker, my humble self, I know my constituents will be happy today seeing me standing in path of justice. I want to thank you very much for also giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you, and God bless everybody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Especially thank the leader of the House, who is the mover of this motion. And I know that my constituents, the President constituents, will support this motion. Because the local government or the constituents is not above the law. The Supreme Court has pronounced. Let me add my voice by saying that the leader, we appreciate you especially for even providing the necessary documents from the Supreme Court. So I'm not just saying out of point. We have the backing of the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in Nigeria. And my constituency is not above the court. On behalf of my constituents, I want to align myself with the prayers of this motion. From prayer 1, prayer 2, 3 and 4. Mr. Speaker, I am speaking from the constituents angle, not just for the landslip or Gogo. My constituents is totally in support of this motion. And we are totally in support of the prayers. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I want to, first of all, state this. That yes, it is quite true that on the 30th day of June 2015, the motion was passed. It is also my belief that that motion was passed on the basis of legal positivism, which tends to look at the social facts rather than the law, which is quite a departure from what the Supreme Court said, which is a judge-made law. Now, that also made it that the House felt then that it was equitable to do what it did. But we must also remind ourselves that equity must follow the law. And what is the law as at present now? The law is contained as a judge-made law by what the leader has presented on the floor of the House, which is a Supreme Court decision stating fully that Sir Celestine Omehia was never a governor. So when you put it side by side with what the House did, then whatever the House must have done then, fall flat based on what the judge-made law had already said. In light of this fact, you can always say that, especially if you use the case of SYMFONI, like you cannot place something on nothing and expect it to stand. So that means whatever we did fell flat, and we are here to make sure that we do the right thing. The right thing is by way of this motion that has been brought on the floor of the House. I totally align myself, I and my constituents, we totally align ourselves with the prayers stated in the motion and go furthermore, just as my colleague Emo has said, that a time frame should be given to request the executive to carry out all necessary and legal steps to recover the sum of over 600 million that was stated in the prayers. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assembly, my very dear colleagues, I still rise to want to thank the mover of this motion, the leader of the House of the United Assembly, Honorable Omehia Martin, for this motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind us that as far as lawmaking is concerned, there is no finality to resolutions. There is no also finalities to law. That is why you can make a law today and tomorrow you may find the need to amend such law. Being an instrument of lawmaking, the same thing with motion, you can make some resolution based on the materials available to you at that point when the motion is being taken. But maybe further, depending on better particulars, you can also rescind. I want to draw the attention of this House to the case between Amaechi and Omehia. The caption is Supreme Court for self in Amaechi versus Omehia. And I read, barely 12 years after the controversial judgment of the Supreme Court that ousted the then governor of Rivers State, Celestine Omehia, and replaced him with Rotimi Chibika Amaechi, the Supreme Court has admitted that the law was wrong and cannot serve as a reference. Mr. Speaker, what is this saying? He's saying that you can do something tomorrow, falling within the particulars at your disposal, then tomorrow you can see better particulars. And then you will also want to align yourself with the better particulars. When this motion was taken, just like what the last speaker said, we are looking at it from the other social angle. Oh, this man won an election. Oh, he declared the assembly. He did this as governor. He did that. Why can't we move that he should be given that recognition and further also be paid his entitlement when he was denied by Governor Rotimi Amechi? But today, Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court, which is the finality of all the courts, Supreme Court, I liken them to God, to semi-God. Because when they have said something on earth, if they have said something in Nigeria, I'm sure the next court you will take it to the court in heaven. As far as earth is concerned, their case, any position taken is finality. And if they have said that this man was never a governor, I think as a law-abiding house, we can't do something different from the position of the Supreme Court. So I want to thank the mover of this motion for bringing this motion at this time, and also to align myself with the prayers he has prayed the House completely. So on behalf of the people of Omehia Constituency 1, I want to say that this motion is in good faith, and the prayers too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I will start by thanking the leader, and I will go straight to the reason why I want to make my submission. Two reasons, Mr. Speaker. Number one is about the finality of the Supreme Court. And our law, the ground norm, 1999 Constitution as altered, is the law that created the Supreme Court. And like Mr. Leader said, in the paragraph that says mindful, that paragraph is simply the second reason why I am standing to make submission. Because it's talking about enforcement and total obedience to the laws, pronouncement of the Supreme Court. And we are simply saying this morning, or this afternoon, that this, our own assembly, the Ninth Assembly, cannot sit back and support disobedience of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, because that is the end, like Dr. Ayapo said. If you want to appeal against the Supreme Court decision, it means you are appealing to God, which means that is the alter ego, that is the final, that is everything about courts in Nigeria. And so I agree with the prayers as beautifully presented in this motion paper, and I believe very strongly that what we are doing now is the right step in the right direction. I so submit.
To lend my voice to the motion, so moved by the leader of this humble assembly, to rescind the Rivers State, to rescind the resolution for recognizing Sir Celestine Omehia, the former governor of Rivers State. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak because in Supreme Court, once a matter is settled and adjudicated upon, it is known as res judicata. That is, no party can come back to that matter. And since the Supreme Court has done so, we will align ourselves with such matter. Mr. Speaker, in furtherance to
we have had situations where parties will go back to Supreme Court for a particular matter that they have resolved, and ask Supreme Court for.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with you to an extent, but as regards to this matter, no party has gone back to court again, and therefore we have to align ourselves with the Supreme Court judgment. Mr. Speaker, in furtherance to support this motion, I will align myself with the prayers ye are so given. Mr. Speaker, more especially, my fear is that if Sir Celestine Omehia had been asked to refund, and in the case where he refused within a given time, what should happen to him is my fear. So, Mr. Speaker, I hereby, on behalf of my constituents.
No, what should happen? So we have not said what should happen.
I think I align myself with the prayer that what my humble colleague SYMFONI rightly said, that maybe his properties or legal action should be taken to back up whatever he refused to do. So, Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'll thank the Honorable House and the mover of this motion. Thank you.
The leader of the House in calling our attention to this. Most of my colleagues have told us the benefit of this and coming from the angle of the law. And so I don't want to do that again. I just want to say that in putting this motion, I want to remind us that government is a continuum. And so if the previous House of Assembly, our colleagues in 2015, had done something which, with hindsight, we now know that is against the law and are seen as disobeying the Supreme Court, I think, Mr. Speaker, the right thing for us to do will be to quickly amend what has been done wrong as a duty. And so I support the prayers as laid out here by the leader and ask that we quickly amend this so that this House, whether the first assembly or even the 20th, continues to stand in good stead in the eyes of the law and with the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of that, you can make a lot today. With the advent of anything tomorrow, you can go whatever thing you have done. Now, in 30th of June 2015, we were in there. Somebody like me was not there. And the emotion was brought to this House.
What you are speaking on, you are relying on the prayers before you.
I'm looking at the prayers.
Because you are here now.
And now I'm looking holistically at the prayers. But meanwhile, let me just look briefly at the particulars of the content of what the leader has brought. In his prayers, let me focus briefly on the fourth prayer there. The money so far that has accrued to him, that has been spelled out, if this law is not revisited, invariable will be doing a great injustice.
Which law?
To the people of Rivers State, since the appellate court has pronounced and reversed it. Thank you and God bless you.
To the motion. But let me say this. The law that emanates from every society is a product of the social, cultural, political, and economic conditions of that society. Either a combination of these factors or in isolation can produce what becomes law in that society and in a given epoch. That's exactly what you find in legislation, and that is why no legislation is absolute. Let me draw our attention quickly to the doctrine of necessity that was invented by the National Assembly, as it then was when there was a stalemate. That is part of legislation. Legislation is a dynamic activity. Legislation is all about law and order in society, because where there is no law and there is no order, of course, you should know what becomes of society. So at every point, legislators and the legislature will always stand their own to continue to review even actions they have taken or resolved before. If you look at Order 34, Rule 4 of the Standing Order of the House, it is quite clear, and that separates each assembly from the next one. If the decision under reference or the resolution under reference was in the 8th assembly, this is the 9th assembly. That is why even laws that every society has, they can review and you call for amendment. So what we are doing, to state it in all material terms, we are in order. We are not out of order to do so. The prayers of the motion, very clear. Prayers are very clear. All that I tried to do in aggregating the various contributions of the speakers is to let us know that we are on the side of history and we are on the path of justice. The condition that gave rise to that particular decision as at then haven't had additional particulars and a better one in that matter. We cannot say that we cannot review and take another decision. It is not true. And that is why we are elected by our people, so that they continue to benefit from such representation. That's exactly what we are doing here today. I have said before, I don't want to repeat myself, that no law is absolute. If no law is absolute, it means anything we do here is not also absolute. It calls for review. Either it can be reviewed within the chamber, or even the other arm, which is the judicial arm of government, the judiciary, can also review what we are doing here as legislation. So I want to thank members for their contribution. The mover of the motion, you are quite clear and precise in terms of the prayers as canvassed by you. Having said that, I believe that all those who spoke agreed with the prayers, except as the leader now hid himself again under Order 34 Rule 12 and explained further what he meant in reference to Prayer 4, unlike what Omehia added. Because those are the other details the executive arm, assuming without considering that we have resolved, the executive arm will now take. And you know, in legislation, there is what is called delegated legislation. Delegated legislation is part of legislation that allows the executive to also take certain policy decisions in terms of implementation and carrying out their function as if it has been delegated to them by the legislature. I think that elementary knowledge of government we all have. So we don't need to state all in our resolution, as long as we are able to reach a resolution and transmit it. The resolution is transmitted to the executive arm of government. Other details therein will be part of that resolution. Having cleared the air, and I can see that the members are also on the same page, let me divide the house. And I will call out the prayers as listed by the mover of the motion, so that we know that this day this is what we are. You know, most times when the press, when they report certain issues, you always have a mix-up. When you go back to your house to watch the television, you stay glued to your television set, and you are, even what you said can be translated differently or transmitted differently as well. So, let me divide the house. If you are of the opinion that prayer 1, which is for the House to rescind the resolution of the Rivers State House of Assembly of 30th June 2015, which called on the Rivers State government to recognize Sir Celestine Omehia as former governor of Rivers State and restoration of his privileges and fringe benefits, can you indicate by raising your hands? Against? Abstention? Prayer 2. If you are also in support for the call on the Executive Governor of Rivers State to de-recognize Sir Celestine Omehia as former Governor of Rivers State and also terminate all privileges, benefits, and entitlements accruing to all former governors of Rivers State that are currently being extended to him, can you indicate by raising your hands? Against? Abstention? Prayer 3, that the House do direct Sir Celestine Omehia to cease forthwith from using the title His Excellency and suffix Grand Service Star of Rivers State, GSSRS, which appertain to only governors or former governors of Rivers State. Can you also indicate by raising your hand? Against? Abstention? Prayer 4, that the House do direct that Sir Celestine Omehia refunds all monies paid to him by the Rivers State government as benefits and entitlements, particularly the sums of 600 million naira only being benefits and 96,520,359 naira 40 kobo only being monthly pensions to the treasury of the Rivers State government within 7 days from the date of this House resolution. Can you indicate by raising your hands? Against? Abstention? Finally, distinguished colleagues, having voted seriatim based on the prayers as canvassed by the mover of the motion, let me again divide the House. If you are of the opinion that you all agree with prayers 1, 2, 3, and 4 as contained in the motion, can you indicate by raising your hands? Against? Abstention? Distinguished colleagues, the results are as follows. Prayer 1, 21 in favor, nil against, abstention nil. Prayer 2, 21 in favor, against nil, abstention nil. Prayer 3, 21 in favor, against nil, abstention nil. Prayer 4, 21 in favor, against nil, abstention nil. Final division of the House. Those in favor, 21, against nil, abstention nil. Therefore, from the results as shown, the House has resolved that the 4 prayers as canvassed by the mover are hereby agreed upon, and the House has so directed that the Governor of Rivers State should endeavor to implement the resolution House as contained in the prayers canvassed by the leader of government business in the House today. Clerk, you ensure that the resolution of the House is ready for onward transmission to His Excellency, the Governor of Rivers State, as soon as possible. It's very important that you do so. Immediately we rise from plenary. Distinguished colleagues, let me thank you for your respond to our job.
Day of October 2022 at 10 a.m. On the other paper, Mr. Speaker, we'll have presentation of committee reports. I so move.